1945, and a few people got together and said these tunnels could be a tourist attraction, and it was 7 long hard years later that we were officially opened by Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who was the Queen's cousin, and we've been here ever since. Starting to show signs of damp. It's everywhere, the water is everywhere. But here we go, Williamson tunnels. Is anyone scared of mice? Rats?
No.
Spiders?
No.
Only me. Right, here we go.
Esse cá empaca todo mundo.
Shut this door. Can you pull it too? It's on magnets like a fridge, please. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. No going back now. Yeah.
Bem alto, né?
Na verdade, ele quer que tire essa.
Qual que é esse balde de terra aí?
Joseph Williamson lived in an apartment in the city centre in Wood Street, and shortly after he was married he decided they didn't want to live in the city and he wanted to build a big house in case they had a family, which as it turned out they never had any children. So he bought this area of land off the West Derby Wastelands Commission, which was a group of people who used to keep old bits of land, keep the vegetation down, grazing animals on it. You got Paddington that way, you've got Mason Street running across the top, Smithdown Lane, which is the road outside, and Grinfield Street, which is the hill going up towards where Tesco's is. And he bought this area of land, which was an old quarry. And he had the vision. He thought, all this land, I can build on it, but it's got all these holes in it, all this quarrying. If I vault over them in brick, I can build terraces on top of these spaces. He had the vision to do this. And he employed soldiers and sailors who were coming back from the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s. They were all unemployed, all begging. So he said, come on, I'll give you something to do, build these houses. So they learned how to vault chambers like this. You get what they call a puglock, which is a wooden former. You lay all your bricks on the top, and each brick's got a slight gap in it, it's pointed, and you fill it up with mortar, take the former away, and then this has been here since 1805. So I hope my house is still standing in 200 years' time, but I'll never see it. But look at this, perfect. And then once the row of houses that he built was completed, he didn't have the heart to say to the workforce, well, thank you very much, and on your way. So he kept them busy. He said, right, I want you to make that cellar bigger and extend that cellar and keep digging. He kept them busy digging tunnels which were pointless for the best part of 30 years until he died in 1840. His wife died in 1822, they had no children, and he just became a recluse, living in the tunnels, shouting at the men, keep digging, I'll tell you when to stop. And they only stopped when he did. And then a lot of them then were looking for work, and Jesse Hartley was just recruiting a workforce to build the Albert Dock. And you can lay stone floors and build walls and vault chambers like this. Come on, boys, you're on. So when you go in the Albert Dock and you look up at the ceilings and you look up at the stone walls, you're looking at the skills that Joseph Williamson's workers took with them to help Jesse Hartley complete the Albert Dock. Opened 1845 by Prince Albert himself, that's why it's called the Albert Dock. And been going ever since. One of the best listed buildings in the country, the Albert Dock. And if you want to squeeze up a little bit, have a look at the map. We're standing just here, and this is the only part of the labyrinth that's open to the public. All these orange bits, we know tunnels exist. Wavertree Road, you come over the top, we've got St Mary's Church. You drop down to where the Royal Liverpool Hospital is over there. This Archbishop Blanche School has now been replaced by that new building that's along the way. Great big sort of semicircular building. It's going to be a proton beam investigation thing for X-ray research for the new hospital. Massive big building. And if you've seen the size of the footings, there's a big hole in the middle of it. And it must be 1.5 meters thick concrete with a big piece of what looks like lead being poured into the concrete before they settle it. It's a huge construction. So because of all the beams, I think the lead's to keep it from spreading. But that's what they're building there. And you come into Smithdown Lane, and that's the police station, which is across the way. And you came into the yard that way. And this is where we're all standing. So like I say, this is the only bit that you can see publicly. Just walk in, have a look. This is the triple-decker tunnel that runs the full length of the stable yard. And that's 3 sets of tunnels, 6 metre tunnel, 6 metre tunnel. And the top level is this T-junction here. And it's underneath these buildings. And because we're still excavating it, it's still a building site. And what we're doing is we've got a staircase in, but we're still trying to get to the bottom of it. We put the stairs in. There's no lights in there at the minute. It's off limits because it's a building site, but we are excavating it a bit at a time. We're putting all the spoil in buckets, and every now and again we'll get a skip, and it's a hard job carrying it up to the surface and dumping it. It's all done by hand, no machinery. It's like a keep fit club, digging and carrying. So. And this is the arch that was built 1805, so it's still good.
1805, cara. Aqui foi construído em 1805.
Above this sandstone arch is the foundation of the very first property that he built on Mason Street. And it was built for a family called Raffles. And Thomas Raffles was a preacher, and he lived there until 1856. And he sold it to a toffee company called Biddle's. And they turned it into a factory making sweets and toffee. But the Raffles family were interested in as much as the brother of Thomas Raffles who lived there was a fellow called Stamford Raffles, and he was the first governor of Singapore when the colony was founded in 1819. So he never lived to see the country develop because he died of water on the chest, which was an unusual thing in those days. And that's the foundation of the Raffles family home, later turned into Biddle's Toffee Company. And this sandstone arch was just built just to fill this space, just to give the lads something to do. He just kept them busy, pointless work. And this was underneath properties that people were living in, so you've got an active quarry underneath the property. Imagine that now. When you turn the corner, can you watch your footing? There's the planks are laid one on top of the other, so there's a trip risk on the corner. So just
Degrau.
take your care. And this is the arch of the tunnel that partially collapsed when we excavated. We've actually digging a big hole in the middle of it to try and find out what's actually underneath this tunnel. But mostly spoil and debris that was washed in the 1860s because this was part of the Liverpool sewer system in the late 1800s. And as the water filled up from the street, it used to fill this up. And then when the water receded, it used to go away and then leave all the solids behind, which slowly rotted down and just settled into little layers. You can see all the different strata. But this is just like silt. If you were to dig in that, it's just like sand. And this is the bedrock. This is the water table for the area. And they were still quarrying stone. You can see the way they're getting ready to cut and take stones out, different shaped rocks. And they wind it onto a hand cart, take it into the yard and then dress it and trade it off for brick. And this channel, which runs the full length of this wall, is designed to catch any water that ran down the wall and run it away. But somebody in more modern times has cut a piece out of it. Somebody didn't and it's allowed all the water to run down the wall and evaporate out and start useful rainbow colours, whatever's in the block. And you can see what it is. It's a sort of a salt in the rock. I've done it once, so I wouldn't recommend anybody to do it. Lift your finger and put it to that and it's the amount. You'd think you'd drunk a whole bottle of soy sauce. It's the next thing down to being toxic, whatever you know.
Pretinho, não dá pra te ver.
And this is the main chamber, which was still being quarried right up until the day he died. All the time we were here, we could hear the builders above. And we were only allowed on the site at weekends. The builders were here all week, obviously. And one of the lads on the building site was a friend of the Williamson's tunnels. He was in our little group. And he used to tell us every weekend what they'd found. And they found this, what they thought was a doorway, and it turned out to be a rubbish chute. The toffee company cut a hole in their cellar floor so they could get rid of all their rubbish. They just tipped it into the basement and it completely filled this void with rubbish. And there's a concrete pile. You know what concrete piling is? When you're building on unsafe ground or there's a void underneath, you've got to build around it. You drill a big hole in the ground, fill it up with a wire reinforcer, concrete, and you end up with a concrete stilt. And you can put your buildings on top of that, and your building will stay put. No matter what moves underneath, your building's solid. And this is what they've done all over this site, is concrete piles everywhere. And that's a concrete pile that's come into the spoil and back into the sandstone. So there's about 7 metres of concrete there, something wasted. But they didn't know where they were going anymore. And little Al's standing just where you are. And he went, oh, what was that? He jumps out of the way. And a pilot drill for one of the boring machines came through there and just missed him. And the builders were up on the top. They knew their big drill had just done that. So they came down the tunnel and I was like, oh, we didn't know there was a corner there. So they went back up on the surface and moved the machine about a metre back that way. So somewhere inside that solid sandstone was a concrete pile. They just left that hole. So we've had some good minutes. But look at all these stones, they don't do the same size and yet they all fit together like a jigsaw. And they've all been put in individually. They haven't been put in and then finished off. The shapes put in, the shapes and put in. And imagine the size of a wooden former needed to hold this together. And this is again, turn of the 1800s, about 1805 to 1810. That's roughly how these were done. Where we are now, we're about 14 metres beneath the surface, because as the hill's going up, we're going into the heart of it. Little hole here, just there. And I thought, there's a space up here. And this is what we call a sandstone gash. So this is cut out of the rock by hand and brought it over at the top. So a few stairs there. Snap away. That's good. And this was all cut by hand. No explosives.
No explosive, nothing. Just
No
by
explosive.
hand.
All by
No
hand.
machine.
Well, any machine would have been hand driven. There was no electricity in those days. 1830.
1830.
Well, we didn't have electricity till what, 1870 something, and 1882 we had railways that were electrified. And when we came in here, we found this brick wall that we took out, and that's concrete that was poured in by the builders when they were making the foundations for the buildings above. So that cellar was full of concrete, we know that. This lintel actually comes out, goes back in, and that supported that wall. What a work of art. And what we thought was a drainage channel turned out to be a ventilation shaft. And the way to see it is through this little nook just here, if you can see that.
Yeah.
And this is true tunnel right through the solid sandstone. And when we come through the corner, I'll show you how. So there's the fireplace at the far end. You want to look through here?
Yeah.
Yeah, through it. This way. And there's the fireplace at the far end through the solid sandstone. They light a fire in the flue, and the air went up the chimney and took all the smelly air with it. So amazing. Solid sandstone. That's the bedrock, right in the heart of Edgehill.
Is it like
So you
stone?
want to stand here, look? Yeah.
Kind of stone, yeah?
Come through. And there's the fireplace at the far end. Have you seen that yet? Look at that. And there's a bit of rubbish and debris that came down the flow, and it's cut out the solid sandstone, and that's the floor of the lower cellar above. Amazing. An underfloor ventilation system circa 1805. How clever is that? So there's the fireplace at the far end. Cut out the solid sandstone, and they light the fire in the flue, and super convection takes the air up the chimney and sucks all the smelly air out of the tunnels with it. There's the fireplace at the far end, solid sandstone. On the floor is solid wood, it's polished underneath.
tem uns buracos. Você tá com essa mão, tirou o Thiago?
Lógico.
Não é lógico.
Por
Parceira.
que não foi, né? Tá aventureira, Bruna. Faltou impedidas.
Mas é preto.
Fica pensando muito, não. Porque...
Não, eu não posso parar.
Não.
Se eu parar pra pensar, eu saio correndo.
Não,
Falou
não
que vai ficar quanto
pensa.
tempo aqui?
Mas vai sair correndo.
Você pode.
Pra que lado você vai sair correndo?
Eu saio derrubando o povo aí.
Ele falou quanto tempo que aqui dentro?
Olha essa pedra, tira
Vale
foto dessa
40.
pedra.
A caminhada que não ia fazer?
Não, é rapidinho.
Tem uma goteira aí, ó. Tem bem na cabeça.
Só tá aberto um
Não,
pouco.
sério, gente, eu sinto um aperto no coração, você tem noção. Tá ficando assim,
Gente,
ó.
olha aí, Thiago, seu
Também?
pé tá quase no vão. É, Thiago.
Hã?
Você serve pra trabalhar com condição de parte de defesa. Né?
De
Você
segurança,
tá
né?
parecendo o chefe dos pedreiros, aquela cara feia.
Todo mundo com capacete, gente. Thiago, tira uma fotinha.
Pulls all the air down here, and that's a bit of rubbish that came on the floor.
Rosa
Pelo amor
uma
de Deus,
foto.
cuidado pra não deixar cair.
É agora, quem vai apertar?
Eu não tô parecendo.
É quem vai apertar.
Tio, aperta o rolo.
It's a bit like the
Parece um cabeçudo.
Ah, tem um verde ali, ó.
Eu não saí.
Bruna, você é só um preto, né? Por isso eu declarei minha cara. É, tipo, né?
Puta, vai a edição.
And this is a concrete pile that was put in by the builder. They came right through the roof of the tunnel, and they didn't know it was here any more than we did. And when they poured the concrete in, you can see that the concrete settled on the top. It was that deep all the way round, all the way round. So they gave up, and they moved the concrete pile and 1 metre to the north, and that's the one that's held the corner of the building. So we're stuck with this one. This is our kebab. So we just leave it here. One day it'll rust away and we'll push it out of the way. But this tunnel, this is the shallow vaulted ceiling technique that Williamson's men learned. 1 brick on an angle that way, 1 brick on an angle that way. We'll meet in the middle, take the former away. And what's on top of here is a cellar full of rubble, about 1 metre of hardcore, and a 3-storey block of flats sitting on top of this. So they don't know what it is. So it's been here since 1805, it's not going to move now. We had a temporary light fitted here, and this is this fluorescent tube.
Olha, grama ali.
Caused the moss to grow on the wall amazingly. We haven't planted it. The circuit that we had, all the sheet cabling, it's totally waterproof. It's designed for underground or underwater use. And it had a fitting on the end which had an uplighter. And the light went out on it, and I thought, I'll fix it. And when I got hold of it, zzz, all the lights went out, but I lit up. And we decided to take the circuit out. And this is just a temporary one. Within the process of putting some lighters in here. This tunnel went right under the street and underneath the houses on the other side of the road, and then teed off underneath all the cellars. So the houses had a cellar, and in the floor of the cellar they had a hatch which allowed them access to this tunnel system. And Williamson locked the hatches from his side, so he could get into every building he owned on Mason Street, but they couldn't get into his cellars. And it was only after the buildings were knocked down that the hatches are still open now. They're underneath. The buildings have been flattened, the cellars are still there, and we can go through there underneath that. But this was caved in when the builders were laying drains near the surface, the main drains on the highway. And we came back the weekend after and asked, can we build this concrete link going up to the surface and put stairs in so we could walk over the cellar floors to go into the next tunnel. And that's where we're going now. So if anyone wants to go, the first one at the top's got to shout boo to chase the mice, okay? And above us here, there's a cellar full of rubble, 1 metre of hardcore and a 3-storey block of flats. So amazing, we don't know we're here. This is brand new. This is brand new. Look, you like the stairs, 14 stairs?
Fiz concreto um pouco tempo para poder ter acesso.
Bruna, pausa pra fora. E aí, Crabó?
E aí,
Tá aparecendo no YouTube, hein?
O negócio é apertado aqui. Williamson.
Daria, segundo.
Aí a gente vai colar. Always wet. Always.
Always, it's the damp in the air.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the original cellar floors that you're walking over. But this is brand new concrete, so this is what we built to support the road up above.
Ok.
Trabalha na mina.
Vamos morrer de medo.
O olho das paredes, rela tudo molhado.
Aí, amor.
Não parece com isso, não.
Vamos, eu vou morrer, mas morre sorrindo, né?
These are all the artifact bits and pieces that we found as we've been excavating, yes.
Um bagulhinho lindo. Lindo. E as topeiras não pode faltar ali umas ali.
Deve ter muita topeira aqui. Só que topeira, assim,
Não, talvez aqui a topeira é isso que
que faz buraco, né?
também.
Só pro mais simbólico, né?
This is what we call the double tunnel. There's a picture of this in York Railway Museum from the outside, and there's a caption with it, Railway Tunnel Liverpool, about 1850. But it was built in the early 1800s, and it's not a railway tunnel, but it is as big as a railway tunnel I've seen. But can you imagine the joinery job, putting all the wooden forms in to lay all the bricks on? And you've got to build up the sides, put a weight on the top, and then take the form away and keep moving. So it was a massive construction job, just building the arch to support this. But above here was a terraced garden, and they came out of their houses, stepped onto the terraced garden, go to the end and just overlook the city. There wasn't all the new buildings at the time. There's the remains of a hand cart that we found. The lads would have used that, made of galvanised steel, and an unusual material for an old cart. You think they'd use wrought iron, but galvanised steel. And that was lying on its side, covered in soil and muck, and the other wheel had completely rusted away. And when we moved it, it left an imprint of this wheel in the mud. And we could have done what they do on these science programmes, where the senior crime officers go in and pour plaster of Paris onto a shoe print, and we could have made another wheel out of it, but we just didn't know at the time. And the only damage to this part of the tunnel by the concrete piling was a little bit of concrete that poured through the corner, a little hole there. That's just a little bit of concrete. So there's very, very little damage in here. And above us here there's a railway track training yard where they put bits of railway track. There's tons of aggregate railway sleepers, and they take them to pieces, and you people put them back together. And they know we're down here and we know they're up there, so no problem. And the intention was that this arch, once this sandstone had been quarried out of the way and taken, would have been completed, and then they would have made it into a floor to make the cellar for the building above. But because this was job in progress in 1840 when Williamson died, this job completely stopped then. And then all the local people just used it for a tip. They came in from the front and we were just piling it in and pushing it to the back, and literally filling it up. I've got a photograph of me in 1995, and all you can see is the soles of my heels. I'm on the very top, banging my head on the top, scraping a hole in all the rubbish just to see how far back it goes. And my son was behind me, took the photograph, and it's in my little album at home. And these artefacts, these are the kind of things that we come across when we're excavating. Old jars, old bottles. These are interesting. These are inkwells, if you remember the old school desk with the inkwells in them. And inkwell. Inkwell. Yeah. In the corner of your desk, you had writing.
Right.
Yeah, you had we had dip pens, so we had to
eu vou pen.
Pena.
yeah, dip our pen in the ink.
De escrever. Yeah.
It's the old-fashioned way of writing. When you see all these old films, they used to use a quill, didn't they? I don't know about computers now, but I'm still getting used to an quill. And all these old bottles, they all carry a story. This bottle's interesting. This is a Rose's Lime bottle from 1862. It's got an embossed pattern on it. And Rose's lime gave its name to why Americans call English people limeys. Do you know that?
No.
Well, when we drink the vitamin C, all the sailors took a bottle on the long journeys. It keeps your vitamin C levels up, stops you getting scurvy. Remember Johnny Depp as Captain Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean? And all these scurvy knaves were all walking into the sea, all the skin falling off. That's because they weren't getting the vitamin C. So when we get to America, all these bottles are empty, so we go up to the grocer and say, "Excuse me, sir, have you got any lime? Have you got any lime? And you want lime, and you want lime, and you want lime." So we got nicknamed limeys by the Americans because that was all we ever seemed to buy. So if ever an American calls you a limey, you can tell him the story of how that originated, and he'll say, "Ah, okay, yeah, clever limey." Yeah. That's 1862, that bottle. The only one we've got.
The seashells, they come.
The seashells, yeah, oyster shells. They were eaten, obviously, the oysters.
Oh, okay.
And then the oysters, the shells themselves were pulverised, smashed into little pieces and mixed with gypsum and horsehair to bind plaster. Because in the old days, anything had to be strong, and they used to bind it with horsehair. So if ever you take down an old lath and plaster ceiling, you can just keep pulling at it. The horsehair's acting like a bit of string. So you've seen that in the building game, haven't you?
Yeah, we're plasters.
Oh yeah.
We do lime, right?
But now it's just gyprock floorboard. It's gypsum and rockwool fibres, 2 sheets of cardboard, a few staples, and skim over and job done. Yeah. And that's ginger beer bottle, still in one piece. I mean, this fella here, this big bottle here,
What about the jaw?
this botanical beer.
No, the jaw, like
Oh, jaws. Ah, yeah, that's a jawbone of a sheep, and that's a rabbit skull, and that'll give you an idea of the diet. So, still got its teeth in. Because there was no fridges in those days, you had to kill it, cook it, and eat it before it went off. And the bottles, of course, there's different bottles that tell stories. I'm trying to explain to my 7-year-old grandson what we all use that for. We lived in a house that had the toilet in the backyard, and in the winter when it was snowing, us kids, oh, you're not going outside. So, and he said, "What did my nanny used to do in the morning, Grandad?" And I said, "Well, very carefully."
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Happy days. And these are a few horseshoes that we find, because this was the council stable yard. They used to keep Suffolk punch horses. They had a whole herd of them. And yeah, they looked after them, because they were the workhorses of the day, Suffolk punches. I've been kicked by a horse, and I wouldn't have liked to have been kicked by a horse wearing that one.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I was feeding this horse, and then he just turned around and went, gave me right in the chest, knocked me coat off. Don't like horses.
So you used to work here?
Me?
Yeah.
No, only as a guide for the Williamson's tunnels. I've been digging here since 1995,
Okay.
and showing people around from 2002. And most weekends, if Liverpool aren't at home, I'm down here. So I was at home yesterday, so that was a good result, wasn't it? Yeah, film away, yeah. So that arch would have been carried on when they quarried this stone out of the way. But it was never ever completed until he died in 1814 and the job stopped. So we had to colour that one with plastic sheet with all the pits in. 19 days, just the water table for the area. And it runs off at the side because there's a wooden floor underneath. We don't want the floor rotting. So it was a big job. Every time I come here, I see something different. I like it. All these bricks are all handmade, all made locally. There are plenty of clay pits between here and Kirkdale, and it was the job of the father to bring as much clay back on the hand carts as he could. And then you should lay them on bricks, pat them into shapes of the bricks, stack them in piles, put wood round them, fire them off. And then the local people used to trade the bricks with Williamson for his cut sandstone. So all these bricks, all handmade, all made here on site with clay, probably dug from up Kirkdale way. Kirkdale and Morton, there's lots of clay pits up there. And as you can see, all the lime mortar, as it's dripping through, it's staining the brick white. It's all this limestone.
Sempre úmido, né?
A few more bits and pieces that we found as we've been excavating. Cups, plates, other people's rubbish, always looks interesting 200 years later. So, and this willow pattern plate, there's a date on the back of that one, 1780. If it was all in one piece, it wouldn't be here, it would be in the museum. But unfortunately, it was broken, somebody threw it away. We pick it up, and it's always interesting to see. And all willow pattern plates carry the same pattern. They all have the two lovebirds, the bridge, poor side, which side of the river. Interesting. And this is from Sarajevo, sort of Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina area, all that type of China, Eastern Adriatic. And the mocha china, which is the one with the stripes, that was made in America. So you've got an idea of where Williamson and people would have been trading. So as they're trading with the tobacco people, they're bringing all their products back as well. So it's trade, isn't it? Interesting. So back into the daylight. What's left of it? And working daylight today.
Os coisinhos.
Feel how warm your head is under there. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Fechou. Hã? Oi?